Hey guys, welcome back to the Vine Outdoors, and today we're going to be talking all about food plotting 101. Now before we begin, I want to preface this by saying this is not how to make a 10-acre giant soybean or corn food plot that'll grow giant racks and attract deer every day, all day, and you can just sit in your blind on the end of the field by the power line and just shoot them all day long. No, that's not what we're teaching you how to make in this video. This video is about small kill plots, making them kind of in out of the way locations that will attract deer, probably like, I don't know, like not necessarily every day and not necessarily giant bucks. It won't make their antlers any bigger, but it'll provide a place that'll funnel them in. They'll grab a quick snack on their way out to the ag field next door, or in our circumstances it's just kind of out in the middle of the woods. There's not really a destination food source around here. But anyways, today we're going to be diving into small kill plots and how I typically do those. So now, before we get too far along in this video, I want to introduce by explaining my process of making it a kill plot. So let's say you have completely closed woods, you're a closed canopy, and you're trying to just take a spot in the forest and turn it into like a 1/4 acre or 1/8 acre kill plot. So your first step obviously is going to be cut down all the trees. Cut down all the trees with a chainsaw or whatever. Open up the overstory to let the sunlight in. The single, probably the biggest component of making a good food plot is, well, water, of course, but then also sunlight. If you don't have good sunlight coming in from the overstory, you're not going to get a good understory. So make sure to open it up plenty, get sunlight coming to the ground really good. After you get the sunlight to the ground, then you'll want to go ahead and take a soil sample. So your county extension will probably offer, your county agricultural extension probably offer soil samples for either free or $5 or something like that. They're well worth it, I can assure you. All you do is you take a little trowel and you go around your food plot and you just follow the instructions. You get a little bit of dirt, mix it up in a bucket, mix it up all nice, and then take a little bit of it and put it in the cardboard sample box until you reach the fill line. It's really not that hard. Then you just drive it over to the extension or possibly even mail it in. I think some states do mail in. Either way, you get it back to the extension, you fill out a little form, either online or handwritten, that just says what you're doing with the place you're planting and what your goals and expectations are, and name, address, phone number, all that type of thing. Anyways, within usually for our state it's within 3 weeks, but we usually get it sooner because I've done it a lot. Usually it's 1 or 2 weeks, but in some amount of time they'll get your soil sample back and it'll tell you your soil pH, what your NPK levels are. That's nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, I believe. And it'll tell you a whole bunch of information about trace minerals that is really important and really helpful when you are planting your food plots. It also gives instructions on how, or at least my state gives instructions on how to fix it, like how much tons of lime per acre or something like that, or square foot. I don't know what the measurement is exactly, but it tells you how much lime to put in and how much fertilizer and what type of fertilizer. It's really, really helpful. So you're gonna want to do that. So that's kind of how you start the food plot, is you just get rid of the overstory and get your soil sample taken. After you get your soil sample taken, you're going to want to add lime usually. Typically, at least in the southeast where I'm from, the soil is very sandy and acidic. You're going to have to add lime to get that pH level to about 5.5 is optimal for a food plot like this. I think ours is around 5.5 right now. But yes, you're gonna add however much lime it says to. If you're in some parts in the Midwest, or there's little pockets of areas where the soil is actually not acidic, so it's already ready to grow, then you can skip the lime step, and that's great. Some areas actually the pH is too high. It might be 6.5 is good for growing a food plot. You don't need to lower it, but if it's 7.5 or 8.5, which is really actually pretty uncommon, but if for some reason your soil is like that, then you have to add something else, not lime, to drop the soil acidity or alkalinity actually at that point, and make it more acidic to where it's more base, around 5.5, 6, 6.5, anywhere in there is great for a food plot. And I don't remember for sure what you add to the soil in that circumstance, but you can look it up easily. So now you add your lime. First you've taken out your trees, you've done your soil samples, you've added your lime, and then it's going to be time to go ahead and plant your food plots, depending on the season, obviously. Sometimes you may wait until you plant, but now I'm going to give you kind of a timeline that we usually follow for planting our food plots, at least. That'll probably be really helpful to you, depending on where you live. This can be applied to anywhere that you can grow a food plot, but the dates might not match up exactly depending on where you live. I live in the Piedmont of North Carolina, so the dates I'm offering are great for North Carolina. But if you're, say, up farther north in Virginia or something, or the mountains of North Carolina even, that's significantly cooler, you may have to adjust your schedule by like a month. You may say like, you do everything a month earlier than me, or something like that. But you can kind of figure it out based on your region and your frost dates and all that type of stuff. So typically, I'm going to start my timeline in September, because that's kind of when I usually get the ball rolling on our fall food plot for ambushing deer in the archery and rifle seasons in North Carolina. So in North Carolina, archery season usually opens, I think it's the first or second Saturday of September, and I think it varies slightly too, depending on the year. Sometimes it'll be like the first Saturday, sometimes the second Saturday. But anyways, archery season opens in early September around here. And at that point, my food plots usually basically just have a bunch of weeds in them. So I'll just dump a bag of corn out, because baiting is legal in North Carolina, and try to shoot a deer on opening weekend just with corn or whatever. But after the opening 1 or 2 weekends, and after I've hopefully harvested a deer, or potentially, or probably actually, I usually don't harvest a deer. I want to get the food plot going for fall, usually around Labor Day weekend, third weekend of September-ish. I don't remember exactly when Labor Day is, honestly, but I'll tell you around third or fourth weekend of September, kind of toward the later half of September is when I start planting personally here in North Carolina. And what I do is I till it up first, and so for the longest time I would have to till with shovels and pickaxes and all this stuff, because we didn't have anything else to till with. Because it's down here, you can't get like a tractor down here. I'm a ways away from the road, and there's no chance of getting a tractor down here. We actually do have a trail, so we can get a lawnmower down here, but the lawnmower is the best we can do. We don't have a tilling attachment of any type for the lawnmower. So what I use now, though, is a weed eater attachment. I'll take a weed eater, and there's actually an attachment that you can put on it that instead of like the weed eater strings or blades or whatever, then you actually can put on a tilling head that's like, it's not super wide. It's like 4 discs that have like star-shaped discs with a bunch of points, kind of, and you turn it on, and it'll do actually a pretty good job tilling. And it'll till up the whole thing pretty quickly, but it does take a lot of energy, and every like 30 minutes, maybe even 20 minutes, honestly, or 10, I don't really know, but every now and then, depending on how many roots there are in the soil, I'll have to stop. It'll get jammed up with the roots, and I'll have to take all the roots off. So bring a good pocket knife to cut roots with, get it all entangled, and then I can just keep going, and it works great. So after I get it tilled up, I have to rake it smooth with, I just use a metal-tined rake, and if I'm using a shovel and pickaxe, it's already really bumpy, because obviously a shovel and pickaxe doesn't till it very well. It kind of just does a bumpy job, but it works. Trust me, it works, because I've done it before, and it's time-consuming, and it's toilsome, and it's hard work, but it does work. But with a weed eater, the weed eater head actually doesn't till it smooth. It does a good job tilling it to the desired depth, but it'll make like ridges and furrows, and that's really bumpy, which could be good if you're trying to plant in rows, but I don't think, personally, I don't think that deer are more attracted to a food plot with plants planted in rows, so I don't care about that. And I think it makes it easier to sprout if you have a flat seed bed. So I rake the seed bed flat, I even everything off as flat as possible, because if it's not flat, then all the seeds, when you get rain, the seeds will sink down into the lower areas, and you'll have a spotty food plot with food plot mix, your mixture that you planted in parts, but then the high ground won't have anything. So you want to get it as smooth as possible. Once it's smooth, I broadcast my seed mix for this food plot right here, and for all the food plots I do in the fall. I use the Hancock buckshot mix. It's a really good mix. It works great. It has wheat oats, and it also has clover, like a crimson clover, and let me think, it has Australian winter peas, and it has some sort of brassica. And the mix combined attracts deer really well. It's great. It's also fairly inexpensive. You buy it in a 50-pound bag, and it seems like it's usually on sale for some reason, whenever I buy it at least. But the shipping is actually what costs the most. So I usually do like a bulk order when we're ordering from Hancock Seeds, so that we can minimize shipping costs and get lots of seed. And beware though, don't buy like 10 years of seed in one order, because seed will go bad. The germination rates will drastically drop depending on how long you store it. If you store it for more than like 2 years, you need to put it in the freezer, because lots of temperature changes will actually make it not germinate. So use your seed up within a year and a half. Like 2 years, even a year and a half is getting like, you're lowering germination rates, and your seed won't be as good. So use it up quickly, or else if you happen to have a big freezer on hand, which I don't think you do, but I don't. But if you have a big freezer that's empty, you can just stash your seed in the freezer, and it'll save like forever and ever and ever. And that's also a good solution. Anyways, so you plant the seed, preferably before it's going to rain. Watch the forecast, plant it before you're going to get plenty of rain, because it needs to be watered in. And for best seed to soil contact, you need rain. Because the rain does two things. First, it gives you better seed to soil contact, and second, it moisturizes the ground so that the seed can actually germinate. If you do it right, then the seed sometimes germinates within 2 days, which is really surprising. But if like most of my food plots take about a week or a week and a half to really actually start coming up, because usually you just have spotty rain showers, and you can't really do a whole lot for a food plot to give it moisture that it needs, other than just watching the forecast. But if you happen to time it right, and there's like plenty of rain, and the ground's super moist, and you get the seed to soil contact perfect, then your food plot will sprout really, really, really quickly. Another thing about seed to soil contact, well, it's very important, but one way I achieve it, in addition to the rain, which helps a lot, once I spread the seed out, I will take that metal-tined rake again and just barely rake over top of it. I'm not like raking it in like an inch deep. I'm just like barely, I'm taking it back and forth with the tines, barely touching the soil, just to mix it up just enough that some of that seed just kind of gets mixed into the top, like 1/8 of an inch of soil. You don't want it any deeper than that, because especially clover seed needs to be right at the top, or it won't sprout. Some of the bigger seeds will sprout if they're down under farther, but like most of the seeds in this food plot mix need to be right on the top to sprout, really. But if you don't have that, you may think, and I've thought this too, you may think, well, how about I'll plant today, and the forecast shows that it's going to rain in a week or a week and a half, or at least I know I'll get rain at some point. But it doesn't rain like right after that, and I'll just let the food plot seeds sit on the top of the food plot until it rains, and that won't do any problems. And that's what I used to think, and I tried it. However, it doesn't work actually, because lots of birds, such as crows and all the birds that like seeds, turkeys, will come to your food plot and eat a bunch of the seed. And then if you don't get rain for a while, they'll eat all the seed before we even get rain, so it doesn't have a chance to even sprout. So make sure you're planting before it rains so that it actually sprouts and gives minimal time for other wild animals to eat your seed. So that's in September, is hopefully you plant it and it starts sprouting, and then by October it's growing. By mid to late October, you have like a 3-inch tall, nice, lush food plot, if you are doing things right, and if you're getting enough rain and all that type of stuff. So sometimes at this point, the deer will hit it so hard that it'll just wipe out everything, and you can replant at this point. Usually, that's only happened once to me. Usually, the deer will let it grow. And this stuff it's quite tolerant of browsing pressure, so it shouldn't matter too much, even in small food plots. Like I'm in the southeast, and I have 3 food plots that I plant every year. Each one of them is 1/8 of an acre, and I've been planting them since 2019 or 2020 with the help of my dad and brothers. And only once have we ever had one that got decimated beyond repair in October that we had to replant. But for the most part, they usually come up, they attract enough deer that you can hopefully harvest one at some point during October or November, but the deer don't completely wipe it out. So it's a happy medium. But October is also a prime time to fertilize. If you want to see the best results, we don't always do it. We don't even, probably not even half the time do we fertilize. We do when we have the opportunity, we do when we can. But a lot of times our food plots don't go, they go unfertilized, and it doesn't make a huge difference, honestly. I mean, it still works if you don't fertilize them, but if you fertilize them, you'll get bigger and better food plot, and it might attract more deer, debatably. I don't really know how much it helps, but we do tend to fertilize our food plots when we can. Just so you know, I would say that the most important nutrient in food plots, obviously they need them all, but nitrogen is probably one of the most important. So 10-10-10 fertilizer is good, and if you have it on hand, it's great. You can throw out some 10-10-10 and it helps. But usually I tend to use fertilizers that have an unproportionate number or amount of nitrogen as compared to the other 2 nutrients, phosphorus and potassium. And so I'll go for something like a 45-5 mixture, something that has a lot of nitrogen and not so much of the other nutrients. And I think that actually helps better. However, beware when you're doing this, don't put too much fertilizer on your food plot or it will actually burn it. It's called burn it, but it basically, too much nutrient, a nutrient overdose will kill it. So don't put too much on. And you can look, there's probably websites online or whatever that you can reference, maybe even your county agricultural extension, that you can reference to see how much is too much, how much, what rate you should be putting it on. But definitely don't overdo it. If anything, underdoing it is better than overdoing it, because overdoing it will kill your food plot, underdoing it won't kill it. It'll just maybe not grow quite as good. Now, a word on herbicides. Typically, throughout the winter, we really don't have much weed competition in our food plots. So I don't think we've ever used herbicides in our winter food plots or fall-winter food plots, because usually everything else is going dormant and all, so there's really not a problem with weeds that we've found yet. I mean, sure, there's a few weeds that pop up, especially right as you plant, and you'll see them, but deer don't really care if there's a few weeds in your food plot, and a lot of times actually they'll eat the weeds. Like one of the most prevalent weeds that we ever find in our food plots, not in the winter but in the summer, is pokeweed and greenbrier, and both of these are loved by deer, so we just leave them there and we don't try to kill them. It may look, the food plot look not as good, but I don't care how it looks, I care how much deer come to it. So I don't usually use herbicides, except for occasionally like spraying a bunch of weeds down before I plant the food plot. Anyways, moving on, that's October. November, usually you don't really have to do much except come to your tree stand that's hanging over the food plot and harvest the venison that's coming in. But usually the food plot will continue to grow into like the third week of November around here. Remember, we're in the Piedmont of North Carolina. Depending on where you are, it may stop growing earlier or later. But eventually, when it starts getting a little like really cold and it's getting on into winter, food plot will go dormant and deer will stop. Well, they won't stop coming to it. They won't come as much. The food plot will go dormant, and it'll be dormant for all of December and all of January and about half of February around here. It will actually like look dead. Like you won't even you'll think there's no way it's coming back in the spring, because it'll look so beyond repair, at least if you're anything like, if your food plot grows anything like our food plot. And maybe I'll put some of the trail camera videos that I've gotten of deer in like the winter months on the video so that you can see it. But I guess the point is, it'll look almost dead, but it'll come back. Mid-February around here is usually when it starts greening up and you'll be like, oh, it's coming back. But typically, we frost seed it with some crimson clover around mid-February, right when it's starting to kind of come back. We'll just take some crimson clover and we'll just kind of broadcast it throughout the food plot, especially on the spots that look like they aren't growing quite as well, that they don't have as much of the food plot mixture in them. And this will just help fill in holes and keep the food plot nice and lush in the spring. So usually everything will kind of start coming back in February. It'll grow in March, it'll grow in April, and then May, it reaches its peak in late April and the first half of May, I would say. And right now it's May 13th, just for reference. I know you can't really see much of the food plot in this video, depending on, I have two cameras rolling right now, so one of the cameras shows part of the food plot, and the other camera should only be showing my face, if it's working right. Anyways, but maybe I'll put a picture of what the food plot looks like right now. I'll take a picture after this video, and then I'll put it on this video that I'm making, so you can see what the food plot looks like right now. But anyways, it's in its peak of growth, I would say, right now. But sometimes if you want to, you can fertilize in like mid-April or early April, maybe even late March, and that'll get you a better like spring crop, so that if you're trying to attract turkeys or just attract more deer so that you can see like their fawns in May. At least our does drop their fawns usually in late May. But if you want to be attracting deer and turkeys to your food plot in the spring, then fertilizing it a little bit again in April will definitely help. It'll pay dividends. So fertilize in like April. You could do it anywhere from late March to late April, honestly. But probably the earlier the better, I'd say, because that gives the fertilizer more of a chance to kick in and help the food plot grow. So usually by mid-May around here, I'm already starting to notice it. Some of the plants are starting to wind down. They're kind of dying back a little bit, I can see, especially some of my wheat and my oats. The clover has flowered and is kind of starting to drop its red flowers and drop its seed. So it's definitely going out the door too, but definitely starting to wind down and brown up around here. But usually by the first week of June, everything's really starting to die down, except for the brassicas. The brassicas will actually grow all summer long, but I usually don't let them grow all summer long because the deer don't really use them when they're big and flowering and whatnot. They don't really eat them as much. But usually first week of June, if you're trying to start a summer food plot, then you can take like your buckwheat seed or your vetch seed. I use buckwheat and joint vetch in the summer. Let's see, I've tried like soybeans and corn before, and let me tell you, it doesn't work in a small food plot. Don't even attempt it. It won't work because the deer will hammer it as soon as it sprouts, if it even sprouts, because it doesn't usually sprout, because the soil is not quite good enough around here in the southeast at least, or at least the Piedmont of North Carolina where I live. The soil is so sandy. There's not really, even with fertilizer and lime, it's really hard in a small spot, a small environment of less than like a quarter acre or whatever, probably even less than a half acre, to grow soybeans and corn. So I stick with small seeded things such as buckwheat and vetch. Joint vetch, don't plant hairy vetch, joint vetch. Also called like, it's like, starts with an A, a big long word that starts with an A, but anyways, I call it joint vetch. But those are the two crops I mainly, or food plot mixes that it's the main food plot mix I usually plant in the summer. It does really well in the summer. I'll just I won't even till the plot up again. What I'll do is I'll just come in early summer when the food plot's dying down, usually first week of June, and I'll broadcast the seed into the dying mixture that's already there, and the dying plants will just kind of fall on top of the seed and create a thatch layer, and the seed will sprout and come up really good. This is when you would use your herbicides, because at this point a lot of weeds will be coming in for the summer, and if you're just trying to plant all your buckwheat and vetch and let the dead winter mix lie over top of it, you're going to have a ton of weed competition. So definitely find the right herbicide and spray your food plot at this point, but make sure not to kill the buckwheat and vetch that you just put in. So it should start sprouting in June, and you may have to kind of like replant a few times because buckwheat's a really short crop, honestly. But if you're doing it right, the buckwheat should actually reseed itself, so you have a little bit of a rotation all summer long. And then, like I said, by September you can kill it all and plant your fall food plot, and that's like a 365 days a year food plot that you have going right there. That's attractive to deer all around the clock. But typically what I do, honestly, is I don't even plant in the summer. So I've tried planting in the summer a lot of times. I've done buckwheat and vetch with some good success, honestly, and it works. But I don't think it's worth my time and effort, because then I have to find the right herbicide and pay for the herbicide, pay for the seed, and plant the seed and spray the herbicide and all that stuff. So honestly, what I do is I just let the summer mix fade out until it's gone. And then the weeds that come up and replace it in the summer, like I said, pokeweed, greenbrier, and all those other weeds, are usually attractive enough to the deer that it'll attract just as much deer, or almost as much deer, as if you were to plant it with a food plot. So I don't plant the food plot in the summer. I just at this point, I used to, but recently I've just been letting the summer plants kind of just grow up, and it still attracts deer, because these are herbaceous forbs with the broadleaf herbaceous forbs that would not have the chance to come to sprout without the extra sunlight that we're allowing in. So these are nutritious plants that the deer like, and there's no reason to kill them all to add more nutritious plants. It's just more work, and you're just taking one good thing out to put another good thing in. So I don't see the point in it. So that's why I've just been letting my food plots just grow up with whatever comes in. So I think that kind of concludes, I think that's a good summary of how I started my food plot and how I plant my food plot and what it should look like throughout the year. So yeah, I think that summarizes it well. So see you next time.